thumbs up and then we'll... Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Scrutiny Commission, Tuesday, the 23rd of May, 2023. Agenda item 1, apologies for non-attendance.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from councillors John Currell, Mark Deering, Jeff Shacklock and Kevin Watt.
Thank you. Item 2, members' declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations they wish to make? No? Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, notification of request to address the meeting. I don't believe we have any, thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 9th of May 2023. Is everyone happy with that? Can I have a proposer to accept them? And sorry? Okay. Oh, you've got a comment, sorry.
I don't know whether it comes under admissions or whether it's... I can see that there is... it says resolved on point 80.
Yep, resolved.
Okay, resolved that minutes of the meeting held and be approved. Yeah, and then it says minute 74, green burial options, to read funeral directors in the Thrapston ward area. It
was just a fill. It did just say Thrapston, and it meant the Thrapston... It was supposed to reflect the Thrapston ward area, which is...
I thought we had a conversation at the end of the meeting, or at some point in the meeting, where we were wondering when that was coming on the work plan.
Yes, that will go to the Scrutiny Management Board.
I'll add.
Will you add it to the minutes? Because
yeah.
it should be minuted, because we had that conversation. Thank you. And there was one other, actually. I didn't get a response to the question...
About send.
83, yeah.
Yeah, they'll be coming out in a couple of days' time. Tom, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, no problem, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Ansler.
Okay.
It is on its way. The officer's working on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And that's it. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So with that amendment, the addition to the minutes, everyone happy?
Not happy that we've not got a green burial task and finish, but yeah.
Well, that will be going to the Scrutiny Management Board. Do we have a proposer then to accept the minutes? Councillor Mercer, still happy?
I wasn't there, so I can't propose it.
Oh, I thought you had earlier, Councillor Owen and Councillor Carter, second. That leads us on to Northamptonshire Children's Trust Fostering Agency, and I believe, Cornelia, you're going to take us through the...
Good evening. I'm Cornelia Andricat. I'm Director of Children's Social Care in Northamptonshire Children's Trust, and with me I have my colleague Olivia Ives.
Good evening. Yes, so I'm Olivia Ives. I'm the Assistant Director for Corporate Parenting.
Can you bring the microphones nearer to your mouth, because we can't hear you?
Just to say, we were hoping to have Helen Dickens with us. She's stuck in traffic, so we'll make a start and she'll join, as she arrives. She's the register manager for the IFA. So we came here today to talk about the IFA. When we say IFA, is the Independent Fostering Agency. You have received a copy of the Ofsted report, both the inspection report and also a copy of the monitoring visit that happened in April. So we're here to answer questions really and provide some assurance. Hopefully the information from the monitoring visit helps in a sense in providing some assurance in regards to the improvements that have started to be seen. We acknowledge that there is work to do in the IFA. It's hopeful in that sense, that it is moving in the right direction. And we're both here to answer questions, really, and hopefully, give you some confidence in our plans to further improve the service.
Thank you. Can you tell us how far you've got with the requirements from following the monitoring visit, and it might be helpful to explain the difference between the fostering when it's a local authority fostering and the independent fostering. Can't say the word, get the word out. Fostering agency. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll make a start, and then I'll invite my colleague Olivia to come in as well. You may have noticed in the inspection report there was a number of compliance notices that have been issued, and that require our immediate attention. We have absolutely concentrated on those and have implemented plans in regards to performance monitoring and how we actually change the culture in terms of developing the service that is looking through the lens of children's experiences. And you have seen obviously in the report how important it is that we achieve that and we are able to capture that information. There's been progress in regards to that, and I'll ask Olivia obviously to discuss a bit in a bit more detail about those improvements that have been made. And it's really positive, obviously, to see that that has been implemented and is working. There is a lot to do, as you have just pointed, Wendy, in terms of changing how the fostering service now operates as an independent fostering agency rather than a fostering service part of the local authority. In a local authority, you know, everybody works as a team around the child, and you have children's social workers doing those visits to the child, recording on the system, liaising with the supervising social worker, who is mainly supervising and supporting the foster carers. In an independent fostering agency, the supervising social workers have to make sure that children have positive experiences in those arrangements, so they have to see the children and they have to, you know, take into account children's views and feelings about that arrangement, and use that obviously to inform the support that is provided to the carer. So it's a bit different really, and it has taken some time for our supervising social workers to understand expectations and try to work in that particular way. Helen, especially, you know, since she was in her post, has made sure that the expectations are clear for our supervising social workers. However, as I said, you know, it's taken some time to see that progress being made. So hopefully it answered your question, and also in terms of the areas for progress, Olivia.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just add to that in terms of the difference between local authority fostering services and an independent fostering agency, the other key element of that is the inspection framework. So within a local authority fostering service, you won't be inspected independently of the local, you know, the rest of children's social care, whereas obviously as an independent fostering agency, that is necessary. And the framework is set up for independent fostering agencies that are independent of local authorities, whereas in effect what we are is a fostering service of a children's trust, part of that children's trust, but then have this status as being an independent fostering agency, because that's the only way that legally you can run a fostering service within a children's trust. So just to put that into context, really, there are only 12 in effect, local authority fostering services that are inspected by Ofsted in this way, which are all of those that are attached to Children's Trust. So it's just to help people kind of see the context of that. And Helen's role as a registered manager is only necessary within an independent fostering agency. So ordinarily in a local authority fostering service, you don't have a registered manager.
Thank you. That's helpful. Can I just be clear? Presumably, social workers were recording the voice of the child beforehand.
Yes, so the other key difference is that the expectation around an independent fostering agency is that they have standalone data information systems separate to anything relating to the child's social work file, if you like, because obviously as an independent agency you don't have access ordinarily to local authority information. One of our biggest challenges has been our information system, because we have the Children's Information System, which isn't set up for the Independent Fostering Agency. So in terms of being able to gather data, record separately in terms of the child has been really difficult to achieve. And one of the key things that we have done since the inspection in February is to introduce separate children's records, which now sit within Microsoft Teams. So it's not really a satisfactory answer, but it is a temporary solution to the tricky problem that we've got. And those files now allow us much more easily to record the journey of the child, which is what the inspectors were saying was missing, was that they couldn't really see what was happening on a day-to-day basis for the child. They could if they looked at the child's record, but they won't consider that information because it's the Independent Fostering Agency. So in the first inspection that we had in 2021, they accepted that and looked at that information. In this inspection, they wouldn't consider that information.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Could I also just add, you know, in terms of safety of those children and those children being seen, they have absolutely been seen, you know, by children's social worker, but that information was not considered part of the inspection. As Olivia has said, they looked separately, you know, at through the lens of the supervising social workers.
Thank you, that's helpful. Councillor McGee, did you have a question?
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for being here. This is obviously not the most comfortable conversation I imagine you're all ever going to have. And you guys are kind of the ones that have had to come here and face the music on this a little bit. So thank you for doing that. Like, it's really appreciated to have that. And I imagine it's not an easy job to have. So that is definitely recognised. One thing that I kind of want a little bit of an update on, if I can, is on page 12, but on page 2 in our packs. And it's something that's actually affected many a young person that lives in my area, is a child's bedroom had drug paraphernalia in it. I imagine he was probably smoking, and it wasn't checked, which is quite concerning because there was an article, public information, on the 10th of May in the Evening Telegraph about a young man in my area who was orphaned at a very young age, lived with his brother, and ended up with £1,500 in cash and Class A and Class C drugs under his mattress, and was facing quite a horrible situation. He'd obviously been cuckooed and groomed and taken advantage of. This, to me, this particular snapshot in this report tells me that that's going to continue to happen because there was drug paraphernalia in that young man's room. If he's associating with people, if he's buying something from someone, they're going to clock, he's vulnerable, let's get him in. And that cycle's going to continue. So I'd just like a little bit of reassurance to know, not only for the young people obviously in Kingswood, but the young people in Northamptonshire, that something is really being done to tackle that and recognise that, because actually county lines and grooming isn't new anymore. It's something that's really been going on for a very long time, and the signs of it are quite obvious. So to have something like that, which is quite easy to spot, fall to the way, is quite scary because of how crucial it is. So thank you again. Thank you for facing the music on this. And
so yeah, happy to provide you with some information around that. So the work that we have done since the inspection is that there is now a tighter policy around bedroom checking for children, so that bedroom checks are seen very regularly now. So things like that will be picked up if they're in the room. The other thing that we have done is tightened, I would say, the training around safeguarding. So since the inspection, every social worker manager within the fostering agency has participated in some form of safeguarding training, which will also include exploitation as well. So they've refreshed their knowledge around that. And just to kind of reassure, it's not because they didn't have it before, but again, our systems haven't allowed us to track it. So we've started from scratch, and we've now got the systems in place to track all of their training. And there's now a requirement for them to be doing at least one safeguarding course every 12 months. So that's happening. The other work that we have put in is around risk assessments for children. So again, each individual child has an individual risk assessment and safe care plan. So the carers will have a safe care plan, and then individually a child will have a safe care plan. And what we're doing is triangulating the needs of the children with the safe care plan, and then the kind of the needs and knowledge skills of the foster carers so that we can make sure they have relevant training as well. So in that particular circumstance, you know, that foster carer then has up-to-date knowledge around exploitation so that she can spot the signs, support the young person, talk to us about it, and we can respond and deal with it. And we're now seeing children every 8 weeks so that we can have those conversations with them from the fostering agency. They still have the statutory visits as well with social workers.
Great, thank you. So can I just get a bit more specific here and say to you, if that foster carer came to you and said, okay, this young man's using drugs in his room, he's vulnerable, he's going out, he's coming back with new trainers, whatever, that kind of thing, what procedure would you then follow? Like, what would happen?
So we would, within the fostering agency, there's a separate notification system. So if you've got a serious incident, we would need to be telling Ofsted about that because that's a requirement that we have within the agency. But what we do very much in circumstances like that is work in collaboration with the children's social workers, and then would be following the child protection procedures. So strategy meetings, for example, with the police to be able to gather the information and decide then what actions need to be taken. And from that, would be looking at, you know, is there activities around, the people who are the alleged kind of offenders or those that are grooming, so that we disperse them or disrupt the activities that are taken. So that would follow the child protection procedures that every children's social care service has.
Could I just add, you are absolutely right. We have seen an increase in young people, young people, and younger age, than previously, that are misusing substances and also are involved in county lines and, subject to exploitation. So we are fully aware of the issue. It's a live issue for us, and we are working with public health to develop some pathways so that we have a more robust multi-agency response and the police, obviously. So there is some work that is happening to strengthen this, in addition to obviously individual approaches, that Olivia has mentioned about social workers taking the lead in that particular area as needed.
Yeah, great, thank you. It strikes me that what you need is a organisation that will provide that level of support, provide an outlet, something different, to be able to refer these young people to, so that they can go to a place where they feel safe and can learn about these kind of things with having an outlet. So thinking about something like that could be set up in the future as something to distract from the drug taking or the socialisation that comes with that would be really great to see in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Presumably the incident you're referring to didn't take place in Northants, or did it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was, sorry, and you reported it.
Yeah, it took place in King.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Just making sure it had been passed on. Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Olivia and Cornelia, for coming. It's hard to see the positives just by reading the report. It makes for pretty worrying reading, very worrying reading, really. I was interested to hear you say an awful lot of this report revolves around reading the report, you would think that actually you're not seeing the children, you're not actually doing an awful lot of things. From what you've just said, actually you are doing them. It's just that Ofsted didn't recognise the system of reporting. So that is a positive. That's something that makes me feel a bit better. But then you say that system of reporting is just temporary at the moment. So what are the plans for? That doesn't sound good either. So what are the plans for a permanent way of reporting all of this?
Positively, we have had agreement from councils to procure a new system, and the intention is to implement the new system in August, during the month of August. So it's not long now, and we will have the new system hopefully implemented. As I said, we do have agreement, and there is oversight to ensure that is happening. So
Chair, that's great. Thank you, Cornelia. And if I can, Chair, so if that comes in August, are we training staff to use that beforehand, so they'll be able to hit the ground running in August? So
we have to prepare for the implementation. The training will happen once the system is available. So we have a schedule, obviously, in place, planning for that. There is a lot of data cleaning and data preparation in advance of the implementation of the system. So there is a lot of work that is happening. Just to say, Ofsted are coming back early July, just to see that we are continuing to make progress. So there is a date that has been set, and then following that, they will re-inspect in 6 to 12 months from the initial inspection. Now, they are aware that we will have the system implemented during the month of August, and we will have staff going to training, and there will be obviously some data cleaning and, an activity around that during the month of September. So hopefully, we are hopeful that they do take that into account in terms of scheduling the next inspection, and then we are obviously ready, as that will happen.
So, Chair, if I can, last thing, thank you again for further clarification. So if Ofsted were to come back within 6 months, let's say, of that July, so the end of the year, beginning of the following year, are you confident that the staff will all know the new system, it'll have been integrated, and we won't have the similar issues?
Yes, we are confident about that. And the systems that we've introduced now are built to the new. So the arrangements that we've got within Teams and all the spreadsheets that we're using are built to the requirements of the new system. So actually the data can then transfer into the new system, and that will be in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Helen. We got your message to say you were stuck in the traffic, so thank you for coming. Councillor Irwin.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to join us tonight. Yes, it is, as Councillor Wilkes has said, quite sobering reading. I do have just a couple of questions about, well, partly about how you prepared for this, because I worked with schools and I work with a charity at the moment where we make sure we're ready for Ofsted by having a mock Ofsted, and so when they turn up, we're not surprised if they say they want this sort of data or not that sort of data. It might be that you weren't in a position to do something like that. But another thing that does surprise me is what you say about them not accepting evidence that you had, because when I've dealt with inspectors, they've always said, show us what evidence you've got. I don't know whether you could just say a little bit more about what evidence you had that you were doing things right, which they refused to accept. Can you say a bit more about that?
So the change, just on that point, the change so we obviously had an inspection in October 21, which gave us a very good idea around what they would be looking for. And there had been lots of preparation for this coming inspection, actually. But it looked at very different things, and it was a very different experience this time. And as I say, in that first inspection, what they were prepared to do was look at children's records on Care First, which is our information system. In this inspection, they were not prepared to do that. So they weren't willing to look at the work that had been happening to demonstrate, whether it's by the supervising social worker or by the children's social worker, to demonstrate that children were safe within that placement and that they were making progress. So that was the main difference between the two inspections, is that in the first inspection they accepted it, and the second inspection they didn't.
Well, if I go through you, Chair, could I, presumably you challenged them about this. What rationale did they give for not accepting the evidence that you had?
So it's basically looking at the IFA records and not accepting, any. So IFA is part of the Children's Trust, and we have been working as a one organization. So in their approach, they wanted to consider IFA as a separate, independent organization.
I'm sorry, if I don't understand what you're saying. I didn't understand that word. Something.
IFA, so Independent Fostering Agency. So, yeah, so that's the. Yeah, so it is an independent fostering agency. It has been set up as we became a children's trust. And to be fair, we cannot blame them. It's how they operate, So in fairness, it would have been helpful to have the full picture, because it's how we have been working. Now we understand the expectation in regards to inspection, so we will absolutely make sure that children's records will be reflected in the Independent Fostering Agency recording system.
If I could just follow up a little bit. Okay, well, what you said does still surprise me, but it might be that when Ofsted are looking at fostering agencies, they will have, I suppose, different criteria from schools. But as I say, in every school I've been in, It's always, how do you keep your records? As long as you can evidence it, that's fine. But, okay. Well, can we just pick up on 3 specific things that were raised by the inspectors in this report? And I wonder whether you would say that Care First did have records of these that wasn't accepted. So, for example, page 3 or page 13, depending which pagination you're looking at, how well children and young people are helped and protected. It says, this particular suicidal child, there was no evidence of this complaint having been recognised or responded to. A little further down the same paragraph, one child who wrote a formal letter of complaint but was not responded to until 6 months later. And still in the same section, but on the next page, the fostering agency considered the fostering household safe despite not visiting that child or asking the foster carers. Now, do I take it that in all 3 instances, in fact, the agency did do what was right, but just couldn't evidence it to satisfy the Ofsted inspectors? Or are what the Ofsted inspectors saying here, is it correct?
We are accepting that there have been gaps in practice. So yes, information is correct. We haven't challenged the information that has come through the report as being factually incorrect. So there are definitely gaps in practice that we acknowledge and accept, and that's what we've worked on and made sure that those things are now in place, and that those complaints, for example, again, much better systems in place to be able to track complaints so that we know when responses are being made and can make sure that we chase those responses up, for example. So it's the systems that have now been developed that allow us to know that that work has taken place.
And for the children who have not been seen in the report, it refers to the supervising social workers. They had been seen by the children's social workers, so it's basically two different social workers' roles, you know, in the Children's Trust. Some that are supporting the child from the children's social work team side, and some that are, you know, historically, obviously, you know, in terms of, they were focused on supporting foster carers. But the expectation is that they also support children and understand children's experiences. And that is the gap that has been highlighted, because that was the area that was looked at in the inspection. Does it make sense?
Are you happy with that? Well, maybe not happy with the answer, but you know, you've got your answer. Thank you. Councillor Anslow, sorry.
Just a couple of questions. Just wondering whether there's been an impact on staff after the report, because I can imagine that, you know, being told that your work is inadequate, there would be staff that would leave. And I'm just wondering whether you have many vacancies as a result, which is also going to have an impact on the service that's provided.
Helen will be able to talk to you about the vacancies in a minute, but I think what I would say is that following the inspection in 2021, October 2021, we have, whilst it doesn't look like it from the report, done a huge amount of improvement work then, and expectations for staff have been raised. And I think it's fair to say that during the period between the 2 inspections, several members of the team decided they didn't want to work with us as an independent fostering agency, and left the organisation. Some of them had been there for many years, and it was time within their career to move on. And some found the level of scrutiny quite difficult, and it is difficult. We know that that it's hard, and they hadn't, within the fostering service, I think it's fair to say, although children's social care had been inspected an awful lot, within the fostering service they'd relatively been untouched. So this is a new culture for them, and some have decided not to stay with us. Because they don't want to be part of that and feel that level of scrutiny. And that's okay. You know, I think it's through natural change. You need to have perhaps some churn of staff. And so I would say that we are probably still within that, although we're much better now positioned than we were maybe in the autumn in terms of our staffing. But Helen will be able to confirm that the number of vacancies that we've now got in the service.
Hello. My apologies again for being delayed. So we currently have, in the post-approval team, we only actually have 3 vacancies, 2 of which we've recruited to, and we're just waiting for those social workers to serve their notice and then come into post. So one's coming in at the end of May and one's coming in at the end of June. And then we have had a social worker who's resigned from the fostering service but actually staying with NCT, has gone to choose to work in the adoption service. So still retaining, because that's their skill set and that's their preference. So it is an improving picture. It's taken some time to get there. I think it's fair to say, as Olivia said, I started in post at the end of June, and on the back really of that first wave from November 2021, and that push for driving up practice and performance, and some social workers who had been with the service a long time. It had been a very stable team. Some people have worked in that service for 20 odd years. So actually the change of culture and the expectations, the processes and the systems that we've talked about, but also the ethos and the culture in terms of expectations and what our foster carers and children have absolutely every right to expect from us. And for some people, it was the right decision for them to go. What has happened is, so we had leading up to Christmas was a difficult time in terms of staffing. Since Christmas, we've had a lot of those positions filled. They're being filled with staff that are new to NCT, so you come into a new organisation, so some fresh blood coming in, and also people that are inexperienced in terms of working in IFAs. So they're bringing that understanding of what a supervising social worker role is. So the processes we're putting in place and the expectations of practice is less of a shock, because it's what they'd expect.
Yeah. So has it had an impact, sorry, it's a supplementary, an impact on the number of foster carers? Because they seem to be, under scrutiny as well, as they need to be. And I know there's always been a bit of a problem with the number of foster parents and so on, but has that fed through?
So at the moment we have, so we were successful in recruiting 18 new fostering households last year, 22-23, which means at the moment we have a total of 323 fostering households, and between those fostering households they care for 418 children, and that figure has remained relatively consistent, the number of children that are looked after. Within the cohort of foster carers, you also get a natural churn as well. Many of them that leave us leave because they're coming to the end of their fostering career. They're not leaving. We haven't had any leave to go to another independent fostering agency, for example, which is really positive. So they're leaving for personal reasons, and we saw post-COVID probably an increase in people leaving for employment reasons, health reasons, and it's now beginning to stabilise. But recruitment and retention is very much a focus of the work that we do, as well as working with our existing foster carers to look at where we can support them to increase capacity if that's appropriate to do so. Sometimes we will support them to have an extension, for example, on their house to increase their number of bedrooms. And some foster carers will care for a very short period of time over their approval numbers on what we call an exemption, because that's right for the children that are in that household. So it might be a sibling group that can then be kept together. So that's what we're seeing at this time.
Thank you. Can I just ask one more question? It's to do with the 12, you've got 12 there are 12 IFAs, is that how you say it? IFAs in the country, where there's children trusts. Are you in touch with them to see whether there's good practice that can be shared?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yes, and we're hoping that certainly one of them is going to come and do a peer inspection for us.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That will be good. Councillor Jill Mercer.
Thank you. I know you haven't been an IFA for that long. Were you not sort of told how this will work? Because some of the things that are flagged in this report may well be to do with this changing the way things are recorded and them not looking at it. But a lot of them, to me, don't look like that. I mean, things like when a new member joins the household, they're not checked. The safeguarding training not being given. I mean, I've been a member of charities where we haven't even met any children and we've still had to do the safeguarding training. So I just can't, it just seems there's an awful lot of different examples in this that really send out red flags. Children, you know, not being listened to, households not being checked, you know, things not happening on time, delayed. There's just so many of them. I mean, one or two, well, that's because we had that recorded on a different system. It's just really worrying that the children are not safe, not protected. And I can't really understand why just the recording system would have hidden or, you know, would have made these things difficult to evidence.
I'll make a start and then I'll pass on to you. So the recording system has made it less visible. Just to say, you know, so it is a change, and the way the regulations are applied, you know, it is a change for any independent fostering agency, you know, that is being developed in a trust. So that is a challenge, and we've had discussions, you know, with Ofsted, and it's been acknowledged as an area where we need to all work together, you know, as a sector, of local authorities that then become trusts, because it's looked at differently, you know, and Ofsted have acknowledged that themselves, you know, in terms of them needing to consider some support that will be useful, you know, for any new IFAs that are being developed. So that is something that is being acknowledged, and as Olivia has said, it's a small number, it's something very different, and it's really important for all to understand, you know, how that impacts on the way IFA is configured and operates. So as I said, the recording system has made it less visible. You know, we have accepted, as again, you know, Olivia said, there has been gaps in practice, you know, and we know that, and we work on addressing those. And, you know, at the same time, I guess it's about acknowledging that the lack of recording system, you know, has made it more difficult for us to see what's happening in regards to practice. We now have this system in place in terms of manual reporting, and we have a lot of effort from the supervising social workers in terms of recording in 3 places, just to give you an example, to be able to produce those reports. So we all acknowledge that it has required, you know, changing how we do things to be able to produce that information. Do you want to add something?
I mean, just to add to that, as Cornelia says, we have met with Ofsted, and I think Ofsted are acknowledging as well that them inspecting independent fostering agencies at the heart of Children's Trust is new for them too. And certainly when the inspectors first came to us in October 21, it was the first time that they'd inspected a children's trust. So they're learning, I guess, the differences that are happening, which doesn't excuse the findings, but it's just a bit of context around that. And I think that the other challenge is that some of the systems that we've inherited in the Children's Trust from the council. So, for example, the recording system for learning and development makes it very difficult to identify individuals that have attended individual courses. So you get a kind of a long list like this of courses, and it's really difficult to decipher. So they're the things that we're working on, that we've put the tracking systems in place that, as Cornelia says, then makes the information more visible and more easy to present to Ofsted. So it's a combination of us getting our heads around what it means to be an independent fostering agency, that the shift in having to work to the regulations in a different way, as well as some of the challenges around the systems that we've had to work with.
I think probably the worst thing is the agency is focused on carers rather than children. I mean, they are the reason you've got the IFA, and they are the most important things. Is that the case? Is that incorrect?
I think it's fair to say that historically and within local authorities, the focus of the fostering service is the foster carers, because children's social care, the children's social workers focus on the children. Yeah. So together they combine to provide that joint picture. In an independent fostering agency, you know, whilst our fostering social workers and children's social workers sit next to each other, that's not taking into account in an independent fostering agency inspection. So I think it's fair to say that yes, our supervising social workers were focused much more on the adults than they were on the children, but it's not to say that the children weren't focused on at all, because the children's social workers have been fulfilling that role and ensuring children's safety. So you've got it's the balance between the supervising social workers focusing on children, as well as the children's social workers focusing on the same child. And what we were doing was focusing much more on, on the foster carers, and not looking at that care from the child's perspective as an independent fostering agency. Does that make sense? So, it's quite complicated.
Yeah, so are you saying then, as well as the systems, that you've had to change the way you work and the way you communicate with each other, and the sort of whole emphasis of what you're there for? That's happening, is it? And are you able to know, or will you be able to evidence that to Ofsted in the future?
It is fair to say that's what we've had to do, is a complete kind of shift in the culture and the way of working. And already at the monitoring visit that happened in early April, they were able to see that shift. And they could see that through the children's records. And I think within the report, it references that the children's records that they saw were of a good standard. So that was a complete change from what they were saying in February. So they've begun to see that shift in practice. But yes, it has been a complete refocus. Lots of practice guidance has been issued, and to both foster carers and to children's foster care supervising social workers. And we also have as well a new policy in place, which is around joint visiting between children's social care and the fostering agency, and those visits will now be happening every 6 months.
It's every 12 weeks for the first 12 months of a child's placement, and then every 16 weeks, so 4 times in the first year. These are joint visits over and above all the statutory... Oh, sorry. My apologies. So the visits will be every 12 weeks for the supervising social worker and the children's social worker in the first 12 months of a child's fostering placement, and then it will move to every 16 weeks. But those are additional visits over and above all the statutory visits that the children's social worker would undertake, and all of the children's SEAM visits. So our practice guidance and policies that we've put in place since February is that our supervising social workers must see our children, and that must be a meaningful visit. So they need to have a conversation with a child. It just can't be that they've perhaps seen a child maybe going up the stairs, for example. They need to have a conversation with a child, seen the child's bedroom. That's every 8 weeks. And then on top of that, there'll be a joint visit every 12 weeks with the supervising social worker and the children's social worker.
Thank you.
So going to the monitoring, they do say that you made a lot of progress, and but it's at a very early stage. So I think that has to be borne in mind, that although they see you're going in the right direction, I think they're going to be, looking to see a finished article when they come back, and not, well, apart from the fact that you won't have the system completely in place, but that your working practices have responded to what they've said.
Yeah, absolutely. We do know that there is a lot of work to do. This will not be a quick fix. We have talked about changing how we do things, changing the culture, changing practice. So it will take time. We know that. So our confidence is that when they come back in July, they see that we've made further progress, and all these changes, are embedded. Then they will do the full inspection in the autumn, and our, again, hope and confidence is that they will see that we are moving in the right direction. We are very ambitious, for the IFA, for the service that we deliver. We want to have a good service. but we do know, that there will be a lot of effort and a lot of work to get there. We are committed as leaders. We also have staff that are committed, and we have some amazing foster carers. So it's about acknowledging, together the improvement that we need to make and working towards, the aspirations and the goals.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got a number of questions, but first of all I want to establish a baseline. It seems to me that you have two different social workers responsible for a placement, one for the child, one for the carers, which means you've got divided responsibilities for a single placement. Can you just confirm that is the case?
So the children's social worker is responsible for the welfare of the child and the child's care planning. The fostering social worker is responsible for the welfare of the child in that foster home and supporting the foster carer. So they work together. So the child social worker's role is around the child's care plan and ensuring their needs are met and their care plan is progressed. The supervising social worker, the fostering social worker's role is to ensure that the foster carer is supported to meet the needs of the child in that home.
Right, well, my first comment is it surprises me that there is a clear division of responsibilities about what's effectively the looking after of a particular child in a particular environment. Whenever you have divided responsibilities for a single function, when I see that as a single function, then you have potential for problems. That's just my personal comment. Right now, specific questions. Can you tell me what the caseload is for the social workers involved in foster care, and how does that compare with national standards?
So average caseload for our supervising social workers is about 18 foster carers. It's 18 fostering households. In terms of there isn't a national average actually in terms of fostering. It's not measured. There's not a benchmark for fostering households. What I would say is that what we are looking at is actually measuring caseloads for supervising social workers now, not based on fostering households, but on the number of children living within those households. Because what you could have is, 18 foster carers, which equals 30 children. And actually what we're looking at is what the resource is that we require to make sure that actually their average is 18 children, for example. It might be slightly higher than that, 22 children, because responsibilities are different. But 22 children, which means you would then have maybe 12 fostering households, which is then more in line with other independent fostering agencies, although in local authorities, caseloads are always higher.
Right, well, thank you, but that leaves me a bit more confused than I was before, because you were saying that the social workers responsible for the carers, you think in terms of households, but now you're saying the workload is in terms of the number of children in them, which makes me more confused. If you've got an average of, say, about 18 households per social worker, how often does that average social worker visit each? Because 18 to me comes to 3.5 weeks, so I would say they visit them once a month. Is that the case, or have I misunderstood how the system works?
I think Helen can come back on that because you've just explained, didn't you?
So one of the pieces of work that we put in just after the new year actually was to review our supervision policy for our foster carers. So the regulations just state that foster carers have to be seen regularly. It doesn't give any time frame, just a regular supervision. So we have gone with a clear policy that sets absolutely what our expectation is for our supervising social workers. So all newly approved foster carers will be seen every 4 weeks in their first 12 months of approval till they go through to an initial review. After that, with agreement, so if the foster carer is happy and the supervising social worker is happy and there's no particular areas of deficit or any training needs, or they might have a really complex young person that they're caring for and needing additional support, it can go to 6 weekly. If it goes to 6 weekly, as the service manager, I have to agree that, so there's clear oversight, and it never goes more than 6 weekly. So it's between 4 weeks and 6 weekly, depending on the needs of the foster carer, the length of the fostering placement, the complexity of the child, and we have the option to move that as we need to, so we can have maybe a period of stability where we might have supervision every 6 weeks, but then there might be something that occurs, or a difficulty, or a training need, or whatever it might be, that means we can bring it back to 4 weekly.
That is roughly what I would have expected. I'm comfortable with that. What I'm interested to know is, what do other bodies aim for? My guess is something similar, but it would be nice to have a professional confirm it for me.
So my background is a registered manager in an independent fostering agency, so I've done this job in the independent sector. So a lot of the policies and the practice that I'm implementing is where I've come from, and I was working for a national independent fostering agency. So those timescales, I can measure it with what I'm used to working, if you like, as the industry standard and expectation.
Right, that's the answer I wanted to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Councillor Carter and then Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, do you do unannounced visits to the foster carers' homes, and are they regular?
So again, we've revisited and reviewed the policy, an opportunity to relaunch, to reset with the supervising social workers and with the foster carers. So with these policies, a bit like the supervision policy, the foster carers have been consulted and remain fully aware, so that everybody working with the children is aware of the expectations. So again, regulation states that an unannounced visit has to be undertaken every 12 months. Our best practice is that we do 2 a year. So we're regulatory compliant with once in every 12 months, which is what Ofsted tell us we have to do. And then our best practice is every twice a year, and we're monitoring that at 6 monthly. So one of the trackers we've put in will monitor an unannounced visit at 6 months and an unannounced visit at 12 months.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll come back to you. Okay.
Thank you, sorry. Just to kind of reflect back on what Councillor Anslow was asking a moment ago, and then just to clarify some things, if you don't mind indulging me for a moment. The page number 15 says, due to there not being enough social work staff, some practice managers are managing caseloads of foster families, they don't have capacity, etc., etc. That doesn't sound like a team that only has 2 vacancies to me. That sounds like a team that must have quite a lot of vacancies or must need a bit more support if their capacity, which I don't want to be too kind of blunt, because I really do sympathise with you and I do thank you for being here. But to sort of be a bit blunt, it does say that because you're understaffed, there's gaps in service, which is understandable, that would happen anywhere, but that doesn't sound like a team that only has 2 vacancies. And then, if you don't mind me just clarifying something linked to what Councillor Owen was asking a moment ago, in the case of the child who was suicidal and that not being monitored or recorded, was, from what I'm getting, there's 2 social workers involved in this sort of unit, isn't there? So I'm making an assumption that I hope is correct, that the child social worker would have known that he felt like that, and that it was just the other fostering social worker that wasn't aware that he felt like that. Okay, great. So that puts my mind a little more at ease. I think we'll all sleep better knowing that. So going forward, is there not like a thing where they have like weekly catch-ups or like meetings to discuss kind of what's going on in that household? Do they not have sort of half an hour a week dedicated to each sort of case that they've got? It seems a little bit like quite a simple solution, to be honest with you, if it's about linking that up. But yeah, again, just sort of harking back to, it doesn't read like a team that only has 2 vacancies. It reads like there's a few gaps. So
there has been staffing challenges, as we've said, with the churn of staff. The position now is that there are 2 vacancies in the team. In terms of whether there is sufficient resource, that's the review that we're also looking at. Given the change in emphasis away from just supporting foster carers to supporting foster carers and children. So I can't answer that right now to say is there sufficient resource, because that's the piece of work that's being undertaken in terms of looking at the whole structure of the service.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if there was sort of one overarching, really concerning thing that you feel like you really need to tackle straight away, what is that? What's the top of the hit list, as it was?
What we did immediately following the inspection was make sure that every child was seen. So within an 8-week period, every child had been seen. So if they'd been seen 4 weeks before the inspection, they were then seen within a further 4 weeks afterwards, or within an 8-week if they hadn't been seen. So that was what we did immediately after the inspection.
Could I just clarify, about your point about having communication between children's social worker and supervising social worker? They use at the moment the same system, so the supervising social worker would see, that the child social worker has seen the child, what they discuss with the child, but that would not be considered, part of the inspection. So it's how we work, but we obviously need to look at separate system because that is the expectation and that is the requirement, in terms of regulations and rules.
Oh, great. Through you, Chair. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite a number of the questions I was going to ask have been asked since the point I asked to make a contribution. So I won't continue.
Can I just stop you there?
I won't continue to carry on with those that have already been made. One of the things...
I'm sorry if I didn't see your hand, but everyone else has caught my eye before they've put their hands down. I didn't see your hand.
It's not unusual, as Tom Jones would have sung. We are one team in terms of children's services. The fact that government and other structures set us apart, they set us apart in structure, but not in desire to look after the children within the county. And certainly listening to some of the scrutiny, and I understand that, and it has been incisive, and that's good, but I really think you do deserve our support. And from that point of view, you deserve our support. The thing that comes across to me, having read the report and listened tonight and listened to your answers, is that you are aware and understanding. And I can say, going back almost 10 years now, being on the county council and not being on scrutiny of children's, but watching it, a lot of the problem there was not, being in denial of what the problem was. And I think that is really reassuring in the way that you've spoken. When you indicated about foster carers, 323, if I've got it right, and 418 children, those people are absolutely golden, aren't they? They are fantastic, who will take children in and look after them and give them the equivalent that those in a family unit that remains together. And I think whatever you do when you go back is to say, and I'm sure no one's going to deny that this committee feels and thanks those foster carers. And whilst things in the publicity and other places will appear negative, we should never forget that. And the number of cases here, and that's the hapless thing, isn't it, about social care. It only takes one case, and that can flare up within 24 hours or whatever, and that tarnishes. But, the 418 children, and I know another 600 in other environments that are looked after. So from my point of view, and having listened and having seen the questions, going over 10 years, the 5 people sat there, and I include Anne-Marie and Scott, if I was concerned about children in this county, I'd want you as a team there to look after them. And I think you do an amazing job. And I thank you for your awareness of and understanding of what the circumstances are. And I think always you should be asking us what we can do. Was it Kennedy? Not what I can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So that we don't end up with this artificial Children's Trust and us, and our criticisms all being scrutiny criticisms. It's not our job to criticise you per se, but to be critical friends. So from me, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Also to say we thank you because we know that you have agreed, to be a friendly fostering council, which is really helping, because we absolutely all want to work together, and promote fostering. We do need more foster carers for our children. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Did you have a question, Councillor Hagel? Or just a statement? Just a statement. Thank you. It sounded like a statement. I just wondered if you had a question before I get... Councillor Ansley.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Hakewell has said there. I feel confident as well. It is early days. And like Councillor Irwin, I know that when you're inadequate for Ofsted, it's a long haul to get out of that to the next level. But I'm sure you'll keep at it. I'd like to ask a question, though, about leavers. When does it stop? Because, we look at, later on in this meeting, we're going to be looking at the number of children who were in care and those that are in school and who've got jobs, and they're part of our data. So how do we keep a track of people once they leave foster care?
So we are responsible for supporting young people up to the age of 25.
25.
So care leavers we will remain in touch with care leavers up to the age of 21, and then with their consent, if you like, or their wish, up to the age of 25 if they require further support between 21 and 25.
So does that become part of the Ofsted report as well, or not? Because it's just, there's only a little bit in there. It says when children leave their fostering families, endings are not recorded effectively for children, and foster carers are not routinely asked about their feelings, etc. So there's only a small passage in there.
So that's referring to the ends of placements that children have within the fostering agency,
right,
rather than children leaving care per se.
So would that be, is that Ofsteded? Do they look at that? Do they inspect it?
They look at that within the ILACS inspection, so that the main children's social care inspection.
Okay. All right. That's
children's social care and education.
Yeah.
Councillor Mercer. Jill Mercer.
It seems to be a lot of confusion around this having two different social workers and how they interface. Have you, is there any consideration to changing that system so that they work more as a unit, so there's just one social worker that looks at both aspects? Is that possible?
It's regulations, unfortunately. It's statutory, so it's not something that could be changed unless the government obviously are changing legislation. So,
thank you. I think everyone's asked questions. Councillor Edwards or Anne-Marie, do you want to add anything to the discussion?
Yeah, I'll just start by saying I think, first of all, thank you for the comments and the conversation, I think, because that's always helpful to help us broaden our understanding and help us to understand what other people need to understand of the business that we do every day. So thank you. I think it's been quite a journey for colleagues in the Trust, as well as Councillor Edwards and I, to appreciate that when we look after our children, or our foster carers that are looking after our most vulnerable children, that the lens of Ofsted into this fostering inspection is somewhat different to it would be if we were sat here. So if you were sat here talking to council colleagues, first of all, we wouldn't have had this inspection, and we wouldn't have been inspected in the way that we were, because they would have asked us about what our children's social workers were doing with our children, and we would be happy to discuss that, obviously. And I think the learning for us, both for Councillor Edwards and I and colleagues in the Trust, is that we were looked at very differently. And I'm grateful that you have taken the time to understand that and to support that, and understand that there are some software changes that can assist that journey as well in terms of our recording, but also to recognise in it that the headlines can be unhelpful for us at times, and where we are assured that our social workers are going out and seeing our children. It's lessons for us to be learnt about how a different inspection regime and a different lens that looks at that same piece of work can see it differently. So I think our learning has been about that 360-degree view of a child, and ensuring that when we present a picture and want to put our best foot forward, that we're looking at our children and the protection and the safety of our children through those multiple lenses in different ways. So we absolutely have taken the learning. There have been many discussions about it, and I am confident that colleagues in the Trust are motivated to present this in the very best way for the safety and the protection, the safeguarding of our children going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, just really to echo what Anne-Marie said, I think when this Ofsted report, and all I ever seem to do is talk about Ofsted, because I've never known such an agency that has so many Ofsted inspections, which is a good thing because it highlights these issues. But when we were first notified of that last Ofsted inspection, we had a meeting between the North and the West and the Children's Trust, and that plan was immediately put into place. And I think it was Councillor Hakewell who said that the Children's Trust acknowledged that that there were some mistakes within that, and it was identified and put into place. And I'm pleased to say that Ofsted have recognised that in their last update visit, and hopefully the next one in July will see even more of an improvement. But also what Councillor Hakewell said about it is about the children, and it is about the foster carers, and they are the best place for a child if it's not with their birth family, it is with a foster family, because they are the families that can give the love and support to that child and the nurture, and we need to encourage more foster carers. So anything anybody can do. I mean, we're working with Olivia now on getting the campaign further forward to encourage more foster carers to come forward. So we're working with some other councillors in doing that, in encouraging those foster carers to come forward, because it is the best place for that child. And I think, we always talk about the child is at the heart of everything that we do, and the voice of the child must be listened to. And so I'm heartened to hear, and I have heard it before tonight's meeting, that the children were met straight away after that Ofsted report, and we listened to the children themselves. And Councillor, you talked about the care leavers. There is more we can do with the care leavers, and that is something we are working on at the moment. Part of the problem we have is that the two councils treat the care leavers different, so they need to come together, because a child in Northamptonshire, it should be the same whether they leave the care system and what still want to be part of it. But I know a lot of work is going into that within the Children's Trust as well. So I am confident that we will get a better Ofsted next time, and I'm encouraged by the fact that they are straight on it when they know that something isn't quite right.
Just a shameless celebration, I think, Chair, if I could. Colleagues will have seen, hopefully, the press recently that Northants has now adopted and is officially a foster-friendly organisation, so that we ensure that we look after the foster carers that work in Northants, whose ever children they foster, whether they be children who come to us via the Children's Trust, or whether it be children who come to us in Northants via other agencies. I think what that is promoting is that Northants are starting to take our responsibilities towards children seriously, and I think colleagues can look forward to further developments about our work with our corporate parenting responsibilities and our care leavers responsibilities coming forward. So there'll be some exciting developments that we want to promote for the positive reasons and not for the Ofsted necessarily reasons going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming along, and it's been really reassuring, and the monitoring visit from Ofsted I think was reassuring, and what you've said today in responding to all the questions. So thank you for everything you do for who are our children. And as councillors, obviously we're all corporate parents, and we have annual meetings to go to, parish council meetings to go to. So if there is any literature or anything you'd like us to hand out at those, it does spread the word a bit wider. So thank you, and please feel free to leave. You're welcome to stay, but I'm sure you've got your busy lives. Thank you, and have a good journey back. Thank you. If members are happy to note the conversation we've had, then and I'm sure they'll be back some other time to. That leads us on to agenda item 6, performance indicators report for period 12, and I welcome Tom. As we said earlier, the question that Councillor Anslow had last time will be with you very soon. I don't believe you've received any questions from members since the last meeting, but yep, Councillor Anslow, there's one here. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't send it in because I feel as though I want to say it at the meeting and not just get an answer. Just trying to find it. Where is it? It's towards the bottom. It's to do with housing because that's my pet thing. The number of, where are we? Number of rough sleepers is the same, which, and I did read the part that says, during the month, the same number of rough sleepers, which was 20, but 5 of them are new. So there's obviously a little bit of a movement in and out, yes. During the month of March, 36 individuals were seen. So we've got a transient population of rough sleepers, although we know that the majority of them are in Wellingborough. Is that right?
Sorry, Chair, being quite new to this area, I'd need to go and check the underlying data in order to reassure you of that one.
I would be interested to know because I do have, there are residents in the town who get the impression that there are perhaps more in Wellingborough than elsewhere because of the fact that there's more temporary accommodation in the town. So I'd like to be able to sort of say, no, actually, Ketchun has got whatever, you know. I'd have some sort of reply for them. Okay, thank you. I'll come back in a moment with another one.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. On the topic of care leavers, some things just came to my mind. Do you know if it's possible to source a KPI on care leavers who have been involved in the criminal justice system? Nationally, nearly 1 in 2 care leavers, nearly 1 in 2 of the under 21's prison population are care leavers, and about 1/4 of the under 25's prison population are care leavers. So I would really be interested to see, and I actually really do think that's something that we should be measuring because that's a real test of how we are doing. So I'd love to get an answer on that, whether it comes from you, whether we try and source it elsewhere. But I think that's something that we should be measuring in our KPIs if possible.
Yeah, we can certainly look into that. I think sometimes with some of those studies, then they are based on quite large numbers and voluntary participation by care leavers across the country. And so often that information needs to be gathered by a specific research study looking at working with care leavers. So we'd need to look at what would be the processes in order to introduce that kind of data collection into our day-to-day, but very happy to go and have a look and see if we have more local versions of those numbers.
Yeah, because it shocks me that wouldn't be something that we would know, considering they monitored until the age of 21 or 25. So that is quite something that we could look into. I'll push further with you on that then. Thank you.
Can I just add, I think that is something we do know because I've spoken to David Watts. So, but I think it's, it's not on the performance, but I think it's probably something you can have the answer to.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Mercer.
Yes, to assist with that, I'm a member of the Corporate Parenting Board, and recently we had a visit from the Youth Offending Service, and we had a lot of statistics, so that I imagine would be available. But I was also going to ask another question. I notice it says 13% gross affordable housing delivered, which is interesting because I was at a planning hearing recently, very recently, and apparently there was a Freedom of Information request that said that Northants had not built a single affordable house since 2018, which we were staggered about, and I think this proves that they'd got it wrong. So it may not be up to our 20% level that we would like, but at least we have delivered 13%.
Thank you. I think that's got something to do with the council building houses and houses were in the planning system were affordable houses on top, but you might like to.
I would just pick up that this data comes from returns that we have to make to government, where we categorise different types of development that have happened in Northamptonshire. So I would be confident in this number as being a good number and being quality assured. Obviously, it does reflect the total volume of development that happens in Northamptonshire, not just the development that the council itself has built.
I dare say it was a barrister perhaps playing with the figures, and maybe it was the ones that our council had built, but it was portrayed as further than that.
Councillor Anslow, did you want to come back on that?
Put this on, sorry. It's on page 34. I think it just indicates really the lack of affordable housing, and that we haven't built more as a council because we're depending upon social housing providers to build social housing, because we're not building any of our own. And I think that number there, that 13%, indicates that we're relying on other people to do something we know is really needed and is desperate, and the time has come for us to start thinking about how we can build housing that's affordable and owned by us, because at the moment it's just Kettering and Corby that have got stock. Wellingborough and East Northants, the former Wellingborough and East Northants areas, own none of their own, and they're relying upon social housing providers to do it, or developers. And as we all know, these huge developments leave their affordable housing until the end. Their social housing they leave until the end, until after they've built the houses that are going to be private and more expensive to cover their costs. I was just appalled. As I was reading it, I just thought, I don't know where we're going as a council with regards to our housing policy, as in social housing and affordable housing policy. I find it really upsetting reading, actually.
Perhaps that's something that could come to a future scrutiny.
Well, I'm hoping it will, because it has been mentioned that there is a plan afoot. But I'm wanting to really, I suppose the question is when? Because it's, it's not something that, even when you decide you're going to build houses, they don't go up straight away, and it's, it's not a quick fix.
I'm sure Councillor Binley would be happy to attend a future meeting. Councillor Andy Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the subject of affordable housing and percentages, I've battled with that for at least a decade. Regularly you find that a scheme is put forward and you say what the policy target is, and the developer says that's not viable. If you turn it down because it's not the target, they go to appeal, and the case law means that they're going to win normally, because they're allowed to cut the number of affordable houses if they can demonstrate it makes an otherwise unviable development viable. And they're the people who produce the figures for viability, most of which I don't believe. I look at them and I scratch my head and say they must have pulled this out of a hat. But unfortunately, it's an area where the council is fighting with one hand tied behind its back, and no matter how hard we try, we're not very, very successful. The only times when you get a high percentage of affordable houses built is where, for some reason, the developer decides that he can't sell market housing, therefore he falls back to the affordable housing situation, simply because it's the only way he's going to get them built and sold. But it would help if there was a change in national policy, which would probably have to come from the courts rather than central government, because the original case law that caused this situation came from the courts, and then we could perhaps be more insistent that the developers meet the obligations to produce affordable housing, because at the moment they don't. And trust me, planning committees have been fighting that one for at least 10 years.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's highlighted quite neatly the interaction between the indicator that's immediately above the indicator we've just been looking at around affordable housing in terms of the total number of additional homes provided. There's clearly a tension there that Councillor Mercer's referred to. You've got to manage both of those things. Just one point to make about these indicators is that there's quite a lag on them. So this is measuring the houses that were built up to March 2022, and obviously here we are in the end of May 2023. It takes some time for that information to be collected and processed and submitted to government and quality assured, and that's where it comes out from here. So in terms of thinking about how to use this information around housing policy, I would encourage not just looking at the performance indicators, but also looking at the planned trajectories for development for the area.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, well, I'll just come back on that actually, because I know we've got a 7-year plan, or we've got 7 years worth of housing area. What do they call it?
Housing land supply.
That's right, supply. We've got 7 years. Great, but we haven't got people who are prepared to build on them at the moment. So although we can say we meet the target, we won't meet that target because we're relying upon market forces. We're relying upon developers to be prepared to build the sorts of houses that we need. Because at the moment, I think the houses that we are agreeing to be built, that are being built, are out of the price range of a good number of people who work in the area. Wellingborough is a really good example of a dormitory town now. People can afford to buy those houses, but they're living in London. So I'm not so sure whether... I think we ought to be looking... We can look forward, at but we need to look at what the trend is. And if you look at the trend, it's just getting worse for those people on the lower income.
Tom, do you want to...
Just to note, I'm right at the edges of my expertise in terms of housing policy and some of the detail of this. I think last time we were in committee, we heard from some of the experts. There is information available on housing affordability ratios and other kind of statistics like that, which I'm happy to share with the committee. That's publicly available information, but I can point you in the right direction if that'd be useful.
Thank you. That's really helpful. On top of the performance. Councillor Carter, you did have your hand up, didn't you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going through Ofsted, we got down at primary and secondary. It'd probably be nice to have nurseries, if possible, please.
I can certainly look at that, and we can look at providing that for the committee. There is in the new performance framework, there's a method for selecting new key performance indicators, including them in the regular set. But again, that information is publicly available, so I can certainly collect it up and provide it for the committee.
Thank you. So am I right? The next period will be the new indicators, and some of those will be trends rather than on a month. So you actually see the trend, which is more helpful. I know not every indicator, but yeah.
That's right. So we're just working on preparing that performance report now for the upcoming year. We're focusing on a slightly smaller set of monthly indicators and then some more supplementary information in a focus section to allow us a little bit of a better view over particular areas. Looking at the information like this, I think we often delve very into quite specific areas, and it's difficult to look at the overall progress of the council against its objectives.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much for coming along, and thank you for supporting Scrutiny with your answers. Thank you. We have no urgent items, but we do have an exempt item, so I need to ask that do we have a mover to exclude the press and public in accordance with the provisions of the section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972. Councillor Murphy, do you have a seconder? Councillor Carter, is everyone happy? Thank you. No, but you still have to.